We're serious about your goals, and the RP Diet app is here to help. It creates a diet for your specific needs, lets you choose your favorite foods, and tells you exactly how much of them to eat and when. Expert System AI guides you along to keep you on track to your goals. For less than $15 a month, you have one of the most powerful diet coaches in your pocket. Cutting-edge data science tailored to your exact goals. The future is here today.
Folks, welcome back. It's me, James, and I'm with Mike. We're here to answer questions, ready to go. Mike, how's it going?
It's going, and I'm ready as well. Shall we begin?
Let's do it.
All right, from RP Plus first and YouTube after. Mark Conway from RP Plus says, Guten Tag from Newcastle, Dr. James, Dr. Mike and Dr. James. You know, man, I think the Germans took over that shit, but apparently World War II went a different way for this gentleman. All right, he says, after a week of deload at home, I devised a home workout mesocycle based on your advice last week and from Mike in the Coronavirus podcast. Yesterday, I completed my leg work, and holy shit, it was indeed a religious experience.
Oh, boy.
Using split squats, goblet squats, and lying hamstring curls using a dumbbell, I was hitting reps of around 20 plus with minimal rest, aiming for around 3 to 2 reps from failure since it was my first week. Today, my DOMs are insane. My questions are, are these DOMs expected since I'm on a new plan? It was a new higher rep range. My previous mesocycle was to 20. I would say yes. James, expected?
Yeah, this is like classic metabolite training. The first week is like soul crushing, and then the weeks after that are like very mild.
Very meh. Yeah. My plan is based around the metabolite focused mesocycle from 5-day male physique template. I have kept the same number of exercises and sets per day. However, I've replaced all exercises with the ones I can do at home with dumbbells. Rather than starting 3 from fail, I choose to start week 1 at 2 from fail. I'm also doing almost all exercises with a slow eccentric, pausing and incorporating my reps, resting for only 35 deep breaths, a little longer on legs. Before my next set, I plan to progress in both failure proximity and volume each week. Week 2, 2 from fail, week 3, 1 from fail, etc. And then more sets. Does this seem like a sensible approach? I would say it does, with the understanding that you don't do a feed forward progression, you do a feedback progression where if you are healing and if your performance is good, you increase sets. If you are super fucked up, don't increase sets. So if you got super sore this time, I would say, repeat this week verbatim as far as volume and try to get some rep PRs on stuff. And if that, like James predicts, won't get you nearly as sore the next week, then the week after that is when you should start to increase volume, James.
Yeah, and I think maybe this is something that maybe our viewpoint has shifted a little bit more recently, where I think when we first started talking about like programming the volume landmarks and progression, the idea was always like plan and increase up to, right? But now it's more of like have a tentative plan, like have an idea of what's going to happen and then auto-regulate, right? So now we kind of have like a feedback and feed forward combination approach, which we think is generally good. And maybe we haven't always made that clear more recently, because I think both of our opinions kind of shifted in that direction where it's like, yeah, you should have a plan, start at MEV, have a rough idea of where to go weeks 2 and 3, but most of it is auto-regulated at that point. Yeah,
and the auto-regulation favors progression in the sense that if you're healing on time from soreness and your performance is stable or improving, you add sets. The auto-regulatory structure does favor progression, but it's a gated structure. That if you're not recovering, you do not progress.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Following on from my last question, my concern is that perhaps I've begun with too much volume. Maybe. After the quad focus day, I found that I was so sore I couldn't really push myself on glute focus day 3 days later. I still had some DOMs even after a week. Wow, yeah, you definitely bit off way too much. I decided, this is why we say, and we're not trying to badger you or anything. We've all made this mistake and make it every other week. This is why biting off too much more than you can chew is not a great idea. And this is why we always say start a little on the easier side. You can always add. You cannot subtract. So
yes.
I decided to reduce the lower body exercises to 2 sets instead of 3 sets this week and see how it goes. Good idea. Today was chest day and performance was fine. However, I kind of felt drained for the rest of the day after. In total, I performed 9 sets of chest exercises. That's a lot. 3 times incline press-ups, 2x dumbbell fly, 2x wide grip press-ups, and 2x close grip press-ups. Yeah, that's a lot. As for the 5-day MPT. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would even consider maybe consolidating those down. That's a fair number for one session, especially if you're doing like mile rep stuff. Like maybe pick 2 and then have another chest day.
Yeah. Is it expected to feel more drained in the high rep phase? So not necessarily, but we'll get to that in a sec. Or have I potentially overreached by starting weeks 1 and 2 with such high volumes? You probably did a mini sort of overreach where it's that technical overreach that you're not like super depleted, but you're more depleted than you would be. What I would say is there is and this is something that I've discussed in the RP Plus stuff that'll be coming out about within the next several months of advanced hypertrophy concepts and tools. There is a lot of and James and I have talked about this on the webinar a couple times. There's a lot of intra-session autoregulation you can impose. One of them is on the degree of disruption, right? So, and to some extent the pump, but the disruption is really a cap. So, for example, how many sets should I do this session? Let's say it's a first session or even a second session. I'm not so sure. First session for sure. It's like, the ghetto MEV stuff. Well, one of the things is, okay, am I feeling a mind-muscle connection as the burn there? Great. That tells you if you did one set correctly. Am I getting a really good pump? Tells you if you're on your way to get good gains, but that's like sort of a minimum. Like after you get a good pump, do you keep going or do you stop? Well, the last indicator, or sort of raw stimulus magnitude proxy, is the degree of disruption. And here's the deal, man. Like, especially in a first week, if you've done like 5 sets of modified squats at home and your legs are starting to wobble to the point where you like have to go get a drink from your kitchen and you like almost cramp, bro, like you're done, so after every set you should be evaluating, am I really fucked up? Look, if after 4 sets you could hop, skip, and play the violin at the same time, then yeah, you're probably just not disrupted much. Like if your legs feel fundamentally fine, keep going. But like if your legs feel fucked up and you're like, oh, like I've done this before. James, have you ever done it where you're like, you're done, but you're like, let's do one more set, and then you regret the shit for another week?
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
You know when your shit is fucked up. Stop just shy of that, or right when you feel it, don't keep going. So during that 9 sets of chest, you probably experienced towards the last couple of sets like, fuck, man, my chest is already really fucked up. What am I doing? Stop doing it. So that will make you drained. The high reps, yeah, like James said, they can make you drained the first time, but you get used to them pretty quick. But you don't ever get used to super high volumes beyond your MRV. So make sure that within a single session, especially in the first week when you have nothing relative, that to check that status of that disruption, how weird your muscle feels, how weak it feels, how awkward it is to move around with it or use it. And if that's getting to be where you get wobbly, it's definitely a thing. So like, for example, Charlie and I, we were training legs recently, and we had planned 3 sets of barbell lunge to squat supersets at the end of some other leg stuff we did. And, the first couple of leg things we did or quad things were so novel and so stimulative. We did such a great job with them that after we both did 2 sets of lunges instead of 3, we looked at each other. We're like, we're done. He's we're done. Like Charlie actually did the snaky leg on one of his lunges where he was getting out of the lunge position and his legs started doing the cat thing where it was poke, and I was like, what the fuck? He's like, I don't know, man. I'm like, you're done. He's like, we're done. So you can always rest and do another set. And guys who say I train super fucking hard, super high volume, motherfucker, don't pat yourself on the back too hard. You could always rest another 3 minutes and then do another set. That does not require any talent, but there is a point at which your muscles are so fucked up, enough is enough. So pay attention to that, James.
Yeah, that was a great answer. And the only thing I would add is if you're feeling particularly drained, a lot of the times with the metabolite training and the myo rep training, the level of conscious effort you have to put into training actually goes up substantially because of the pain, and the proximity to failure just goes up immediately. So you tend to be more psychologically engaged in what you're doing a little bit more and having to pay attention. This hurts, ow, I'll have to keep going. Or I feel tired because I've already done 20 reps, but I still think I can get to 30. I have to keep pushing. That's probably where you're feeling most drained from. And that's just a normal part of doing that kind of training. So I'd say you probably overdid it on the legs. And we already addressed that, but that's probably where you're feeling that I feel like shit from.
Yep. And he says, thank you in advance and apologies for the 6-year volume of question. Please don't apologize, sir. You pay good money to be on RP Plus. I hope both of you and your families are still healthy and managing to find enjoyment in these crazy times. I'm going to make a really, really politically incorrect joke.
No.
Yeah, I shouldn't, but it's really just my expense. Not all of my family is healthy, but it's the bad people in my family that are sick. So God works in mysterious ways.
Karma came around.
I heard your Aunt Marcy's sick. I'm like, yeah, please, God, finally finish what you started 39 fucking years ago.
Dude, I had a similar experience. I was watching a documentary on the Menendez murders, and
I saw that on Netflix or whatever, and I was like, "Whoa, that's a thing."
Yeah, there was one of the guys. So the dad gets shotgunned to death, right? And one of his employees, they're interviewing him, and they're like, "Sounds like you're managing your emotions really well." What do you mean, hiding my glee? And I was like, "Oh, damn, this guy wanted this motherfucker dead. Apparently, he had it coming." So that just made me think of that.
Yeah, the Menendez brothers, were they like okay, I just got Crystal. I just have to watch it tonight. We're gonna put it on.
Yeah, it kind of goes a different route than I thought because they paint the picture in the media of them just being these like stuck up rich kids who just wanted mom and daddy's money. But then this like whole other thing, like kind of, I don't want to spoil it, but there's this whole other side.
Fucked up, huh?
Real fucked up, yeah, and it's interesting.
Damn. All right. Marcia Belay says, hi, docs. I know that the deadlift is a shitty exercise for physique purposes. But folks, that's not shitty. It's not shitty exercise for physique purposes. It just doesn't have a great SFR, which means, but it has a huge raw stimulus magnitude, so its applicability for advanced athletes is limited, but beginners get a lot out of it, and it's really time efficient, and so on and so forth. So, but you are correct. In many instances, it's shitty. So, but Dr. Mike always says that a lot of his back development erector straps is due to his early deadlifting. Oh, I guess I just answered the question by accident. How would you implement DEDs into a hypertrophy program for the purpose of developing one's back, mostly traps and erectors? Thanks as always, guys. Look, I would do it for mostly beginners and intermediates, and I would make them do excellent technique, sets of 5 to 10 in the deadlift. Full pause is good. Touch and go is fine as long as it's like the gentlest touch in the world and not like one of those slam weight to the ground and the rebound catches you the first 3 inches.
I can tell you straight up, I've hurt myself deadlifting exclusively from doing touch and goes.
100%. Especially with like hexagonal plates where they like will play one plate.
Turn a little bit, yeah.
Like, that's it. And those are super great. And I would say in the early part of your lifting, especially, or if you really, really need spinal erectors, you do them as a first exercise. You do them far away from squats. So, for example, what you can do, here's an easy setup for a program. You do two sessions a week. Session 1 is you do multiple sets of 5 to 10 reps in the deadlift. And to keep it in the 5 to 10 rep range, you might have to do some down sets. Down sets are excellent for deadlifts. And then when you're done deadlifting, which you probably want to do, is take a little sort of break, so to speak, from axial loading by doing something like a lying or seated hamstring curl for higher reps. It gets your hamstrings a ton, and it leaves you the fuck sitting down or even laying down, really easing up your back. And then I would finish with a quad exercise, something like a high rep leg press or something like that, or myo reps on leg press, because you're not going to be limited in your quad training by your posterior chain. And then later in the week, that would be like a Monday, Thursday, you could do your regular squatting and then stiff-legged deadlifting or hybrid good mornings and all that other stuff when your back is relatively healed. And I would also, during the time of deadlifting for hypertrophy, I would also make sure I'm doing plenty of bent rowing later in the week, of course, the deadlift, and lots of rowing in general, just to make sure that your deadlift isn't just a drop in the bucket for your erector volume and your trap volume and your rhomboid volume, but that it's a concentrated loading of lots of stuff in that direction from which you can receive a lot of growth that hangs on when you get away from higher volume pulling later in later blocks and macro cycles. James, anything?
Yeah, that was good. I would just say, for anyone who's like a late intermediate or beyond, I would not program deadlifts for the purposes of developing erectors, traps, anything that's not basically like hips or hamstring dominant kind of movements that are goals. Wouldn't use it. And really, I would really only use it for beginners, and I would consider it to be a happy accident. I would still program it in such a way where that day was focused on the posterior chain muscles in the legs, and it would be treated as predominantly a leg day. I wouldn't treat it as like a combination back and leg day, and I would be cognizant of the toll that it took on those other muscles as a happy accident. So I wouldn't program like a heavy bent row later that day. I might do something light, like a cable row or some upright rows or something for the traps, but nothing where it's going to be a lot of axial loading. You're already toast at that point. So I think it's a great tool for novice, beginner, early intermediate, and then at that point you can start making a pretty calculated trade-off where you say there's probably a better way to hit these back muscles, maybe even a better way to hit my lower muscles by doing other training methods that don't wipe me out systemically quite as much.
Yep 100%. Patrick Barney says, hey guys, so it's week 2 of my meso, and due to some unforeseen circumstance, I've overreached my forearms. Motherfucker.
Oh boy.
We know.
It's on that Pornhub.
Oh, he said, really though, I had a serious question about my current training situation. So I used to be a pretty fat 160 pounds before I got on TRT, and once I got on, I went hard on bulk mode. It was a solid job of the HUD at 190.
Nice.
LOL, with the same body comp. That's really good.
Ooh, yeah.
I've been on a diet back down for a bit now, but I'm kind of just curious about your guys' theoretical opinion of people in a similar situation to mine, either untrained or essentially going on gear. LOL. As I understand it, a lot of people in the aerospace community can point back to a job of bulk early in their career, which they believe is where they gain the majority of their muscles, or at least a lot of it. Do you think there is something inherently beneficial about pushing way beyond we feel comfortable, i.e., Would I benefit from pushing in the 200s as opposed to cyclical bulk and cut cycles between 10 and 20% body fat as RP typically recommends? I think those things are a really stupid idea. James and I have both done them because we were young and stupid. I think that what I will say though is so I don't think that's a good idea. But you said that, do you think there's something inherently beneficial about pushing way beyond where you feel comfortable? Here's the thing. When you're cycling in that 10 to 20% body fat range and you've gotten your lean muscle to the point where you now weigh 190 lean, then 200 lean, then 210 relatively lean, every time you even get to 215 from 210 or 218, that will be way beyond. So the hardest mass I've ever done was my more recent one, where I massed up to gee whiz. So a year ago I massed up to 265, which wasn't my all-time heaviest, and I had been drug-free. I had been 270 before, but I did it with more clean food, and it was fucking god-awful, even though I was coming back to an earlier body weight. Then later I did another mass, but I started out lighter and leaner again, and I pushed only to 250, and that was hard as fuck. Getting from 245 to 250 took like everything that I could possibly fucking do, and even that was tough. So it's not getting 20 and 30 pounds above your weight where you're already super fat. Actually, once you gain some fat, unfortunately, your insulin dynamics and your glucose sensitivity and nutrient sensitivity dynamics change in such a way that gaining more weight is easier, which is why people who get really obese actually can gain weight really fast, because now their satiety signaling is off. Fat cells have no problem expanding. What's tough is gaining weight with relatively healthy food when you're relatively lean. That shit is hard. That is the kind of pushing you should do, but it shouldn't be the kind where you get super, super sloppy, because that, first of all, leaves a ton of excess skin. You deal with all that bullshit later, and also is really, really bad for your health. It probably doesn't add any more muscle than doing it the right way, James.
Yeah, I agree. I think the slow, steady, cyclical approach is generally going to be the way to go. I think it can be fun and motivating for people to get that first big mass, because they're probably reaping two big benefits, which is their beginner gains, but also they're probably a little bit more conscious of how many calories and maybe macros they're eating for the first time. So they're kind of riding a really big wave of beginner gains at that point, which is great and it feels good. It also feels good to do a mass phase and be able to eat a shitload sometimes. So I think there are like psychological appeals to doing like the full-on Java mass, and especially if you've been cutting for a really long, like if you were like a really heavy person and you've lost like hundreds of pounds at this point, you're like, dude, I'm just so tired of cutting. That's still a bad situation because you're going to be more prone to rebounding, but I could see the psychological appeal of having a period where you get to just like kind of eat a little bit more, maybe eat just what you want and not be quite as nitpicky about it. The downsides is what Mike already outlined, where kind of the physiological costs you sustain generally outweigh the benefits you reap both physically and psychologically. So I still think that like I would rather see you get uncomfortable doing 15 weeks of mass mini cut and then another 15 weeks of mass and being really uncomfortable at the end of that versus being uncomfortable at the end of 4 weeks from just stuffing
100%.
Yourself.
100%. And just real quick, being uncomfortable eating cookies and protein shakes is a fun way of being uncomfortable. If you really want to be an Iron Warrior and do what it takes, be uncomfortable eating rice, broccoli, and chicken, and then having 2 nights a week where you get to eat cookies and ice cream or Taco Bell. Like, that is a great combination of still super fun. The junk food always tastes good because it's always novel every week, but you still smash a ton of food. You're not going to have any issues being like, oh man, I'm really still craving food. You're not going to crave shit after you slam 600 grams of fucking rice per day for 4 days in a row. You're going to be like, fuck this, right? That's what it really takes to do a really good job and keep your body fat in check, keep your hunger super well aligned, and make sure that everything you're gaining is as much muscle as possible. Because like gaining fat just really isn't that hard. Gaining weight isn't that hard. People always say, gaining weight's hard. It's not that hard. America, world champions, back to back to back, gaining weight. And you just do it by eating super tasty foods with super high levels of saturated fat and sugar. And the thing is, like, that's just not the way to get muscle, and eating for muscle gains is tougher. And that's what you should challenge yourself with rather than just Java bulk.
Yeah. I had another Quest pizza last night. It was good.
Woof.
It's like all fat.
Yeah. No carbs. That's good at least. All right. And he says, appreciate you guys as always, and hopefully you and your families are doing well. Excited to wreck my quads for the entirety of May at the London seminar. Fingers crossed. Unfortunately, Patrick, you can uncross your fingers because almost certainly that seminar is getting postponed. Period.
Bummer.
Because
Yeah.
the United States is just going to be breathing its first sigh of relief in early May. And travel restrictions around the world will probably begin, my prediction is to ease up in some capacity through the summer. That's when everyone's really going to be breathing a big sigh. So May is too close. And, well, I'm in that seminar and we're already discussing TLDR, how to tell folks that it's postponed. So, because it's not even certain that in London at that juncture, public gatherings of that size will be legal, right?
Or ethical, right? Even if they are legal, they might not be ethical at that point too. So, 100%. I heard UEBC had the same thing, and that one takes place in the summer, and they've already said,
yes.
You know what?
Yep, UEBC in Australia is postponed until the same time next year. So I sent an email to Air China to try to get my tickets moved to next year, and we'll see what they have a 1 week return policy on emails. We'll see how close they get to that. It might be like never. They might just tell all Americans to go fuck off, and I'll be out.
Ouch.
A lot of money. Fuck 'em.
Yeah.
All right. It's funny too because I'm flying with Brad Schoenfeld, and I told him like, "Hey man, it'll be fine." He's like, "Air China, are you serious?" And I'm like, "I swear to God, it's a great airline." And then like all of a sudden this shit happens. I want to be like, "It's not Air China's fault. God damn it."
He's like, "Mike, this is just a poor reflection on you. Everything about this is because you're bad."
Are bad. All right, Hugo Torres. Sounds like a guy who's in your fight bracket, and you're like, "I don't want to fight that guy."
Yeah, you see that, and you're like, "Ah, shit."
Fuck, is he Brazilian or Mexican? Either way, I'm getting my ass fucked up.
Sorry, real quick tangent. I've been watching just like the Fight Pass like streams just because I'm dying for sports. And oh man, they've been having like the Pride and the fucking Pancrase replays on.
Oh, that's great.
Oh my God. I was watching one yesterday and Butterbean fought this other giant fat Brazilian guy.
Whoa.
And he Americana'd him. I was like, I completely forgot this even happened. And I'm almost certain that I watched it when I was younger. You know what I mean? Like
Butterbean, no submissions?
I know. I was like, Butterbean wins by submission? Are you kidding me? Against a Brazilian guy? Anyway, sorry.
Wow.
It was
Can
funny.
you imagine getting Americana by Butterbean? It's one of those people who are like, really, you got Americana? And you're like, yeah, he weighs 8,000 pounds.
His top pressure just was
I
enough.
didn't tap to the Americana. I tapped to his titty in my mouth. And I was dying. There you go. Jen Case was competing in an IBJJF once, and a girl's titty fell out onto her face, and she was like, "Ooh!"
Like, can we put that back? That happened in a UFC fight. A girl's boob popped out, and they did a really good job of like stopping it really quick in a way that was kind of discreet, where they were like, "Hey, fix it," and she was like, "Oh shit!" And it happens, you know.
All right. Hugo Torres says, "Hi, Dr. Mike, Dr. James. What is your nutritional, fitness, strength, mental health, and general advice for a trucker? My goal is more physique-oriented, but advice in all aspects would be much appreciated. I'm 190 pounds, 6'1" male, trucker, around 18% body fat, visual test. Was very overweight about a year ago, but got so serious into bettering myself and dropped 60 pounds. Amazing. I accomplished this by cleaning out my nutrition and doing workouts on the highway, truck stop parking lots during my work trips. That's fucking awesome. Nutrition was simpler to modify than with exercise, but I struggle with the hunger. Healthy meals satisfy my hunger for 3 hours, but then I'm on the road and can't have a decent meal, so snacks are my go-to. However, healthy snacks don't satisfy my hunger all that much. Besides, I sometimes have to drive at night and need to be awake, so snacking on junk food helps me stay more awake than snacking on healthy food. Well, the easy recommendation there is just taking more caffeine. I still drink coffee, but I've built a high tolerance over the years that doesn't help me that much, hence I snack junk. There are stronger things than coffee, but also you probably cycle your caffeine intake a little bit, get some sensitivity back. So would fat burners control appetite help? Yes, but they're not a long-term solution. What are the pros and cons about using such supplement? Just like something you do at the end of a bodybuilding prep. It's not something you can sustain.
Also, if you're desensitized to like stimulants already, then the fat burner might have almost no effect at all.
For sure. So just real quick on the nutrition, let's see if James and I can give you some recommendations. So one thing you can do is healthy snacking should actually control your hunger if you're adding in the right kind of healthy calories. So yeah, you should have some like carrots or celery or broccoli or whatever as veggies. But if you have some lean meats with that as snacks, that will really kick your hunger. Also, protein bars are great. Now you're going to fucking fart that truck up into the goddamn moon. But who gives a shit? Nobody goes in that cab anyway, other than the lot lizards you pick up, I'm sure. By the way, folks, lot lizards are truck stop prostitutes, for those of you not in the know. Something I learned from my sister.
Large Marge.
Exactly. So protein bars are super great for controlling hunger. And What else? I think that, choosing just those healthier options, and even you can buy one of those like sub sandwiches at a truck stop, or there's Subways everywhere. Buy a Subway sub and just keep it like lower in fat, plenty of protein, double the meat, tons of veggies. And all of a sudden, that's like a really awesome, healthy meal that'll keep you fuller longer. So make sure the snacks are healthier food, and they can actually keep you fuller calorie per calorie than unhealthy. The reason that snacking on unhealthy food seems to hit your hunger better is because it has got way more calories in it. So I would say double up on healthy food and you'll be better off. Other than that, I think that your nutritional intervention is really, really awesome. I think it's working really well for you. Another thing real quick is you may want to, and this is not advice we usually give, but because you're very inactive, you may benefit from a higher intake of healthy fats, things like nuts and avocados and things like that, nut butter, a higher intake of proteins and veggies, but a lower intake of carbs. Since you're sitting around a lot, you might not really need the carbs a ton. And it has been shown that for some people, a relatively low carbohydrate diet can blunt hunger more calorie for calorie than including some carbs. So that's something I would definitely consider. James, any other nutrition tips we can give here?
I actually watched a documentary on nutrition and truckers a while ago, and this is going to be a very obscure thing. It was on, I don't know, like A&E or some bullshit I was watching, and they were trying to make truckers more healthy, and they were monitoring their bowel movements, and they were noticing that like some truckers wouldn't pass, something they ingested for like 2-3 days at a time because they were eating a lot of junk food and they were so, just stationary. They're just sitting all day and just sitting in the truck. And so they tried all these different interventions to get the truckers to eat healthier food. So they were like, and they did a good job where they were like, oh, it's not that you have to go to like, Sprouts and get all these fresh fruits and vegetables all the time, but let's try and make some healthier options when you're on the road. And they found that they were able to pass things more readily and more normally on a better schedule. But one of the problems the truckers had was that they were taking too many dumps and they would have to slow down, and like they were having a hard keeping their schedule of deliveries and their freight transit and stuff. So there's definitely a balance you're going to have to strike there between like, you obviously want to be promoting health outcomes and having plenty of fiber and all that stuff, but you also have to make sure that you're making your deliveries on time. So I think all those are good. Most, we travel a lot, and either by car or by plane or both. And most gas stations and truck stops seem to be getting better in terms of having things like protein bars, like jerky snacks, cheese snacks. I've seen Greek yogurt's been popping up a lot more. I've been seeing more and more protein shakes. And now I'll even see places, they'll have just like a chicken breast that you can get, or like a chicken skewers or chicken breast or anything like that. So there are some like good protein options, and protein's going to be really good for keeping you full. I think the healthy fats is something that you can explore. The fruits and vegetables is going to be hit or miss. Like obviously we would probably encourage you to get as much good fruits and vegetables as you can. But if you're primarily using, convenience stores and truck stops, like who knows what they're going to have? They might have a banana or an apple or something, or they might have like a fresh like broccoli with like a ranch kind of dipping thing. Who knows? I think if you haven't watched the movie Over the Top, that should be your first go-to place for information about trucking. And
don't do any of that he does, because it's all stupid. But watch.
You got to get the cable thing put in there so you could. This is how Stallone got fucking ripped, right? Just those internal rotations.
Yep.
I love that movie.
It's an amazing movie. All right, and then he says, as for fitness, I did home-based workouts, but on the road, like I mentioned. I'd also go to the gym to do barbell workouts. I was able to hit my goal of losing weight, but now I want more size and strength. Yes, I've considered the gym free program, but do I need to dismiss my goal of being strong in the barbell lifts? Moreover, the days I'm able to go to the gym on 2 consecutive days, so I do upper body one day and lower body the next day. That means I train lifts 1 time per week, which I understand is suboptimal, right? Should I just ditch the gym and barbell work altogether? No, I don't think so. I think you can go to 2 consecutive gym days, do fucking brutal high volume barbell fucking based workouts for lower one day, upper the next, or however you want to do it. And then when you're traveling in the truck, throw some dumbbells on that motherfucker and do the RP Gym Free program, but a lower frequency one, like a 2 or 3 day program, so that you're training 4, 5, 6 days a week, and a 2, 3, or 4 day program, I guess. So you're training 4, 5, 6 days a week, and some of that training is, during the week with dumbbells and stuff like that, but you still get technical practice on the barbells, and a dumbbell should support and expand your muscle mass. So I think it's workable, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would say is see if you can get a 24-hour gym membership that has a dongle. I don't mean 24-hour fitness. It might actually be 24-hour fitness, but any of the 24-hour gyms that you can dongle in, right? You might be able to just get more gym workouts on the road if it's one of the big major chains like Anytime, 24-hour, and there's some other ones like Snap, Crunch, where I think you can just literally just dongle in. So if you're on the road and you're like,
That's a really good idea.
I want to get a barbell workout in. Like, there's plenty of those major chains. They're slightly more expensive than like a typical Globo gym, but not by much. So that might be a really good option of having a combination of like 24-hour dongle gym membership and like the workout at home stuff. Probably be really good.
Yep. Best of luck to you. Also, within the next 5 to 10 years, the trucking industry will probably experience a contraction in employment because of automated trucking, which is great. And perhaps you can get a job as a manager of automated trucks or something logistics related, but look into that, read up on it, and see if you can't get ahead of the curve.
I was reading that they have trouble. Like, once the truck is on the highway, it's golden, but it's the transitional periods of like getting on and off the highway that are difficult.
What may very well actually happen, at least for some time, is, and for liability purposes, is truckers are going to have an autopilot mode where they can even potentially sleep, but maybe they'd just be awake. The truck would drive itself, and they would be able to read or do other things, watch TV, manage logistics stuff, stay in contact with their coordinators. And then once the truck reached a place where it couldn't safely go by itself or whatever, like backing into an alley or getting actual delivery done, then the person would be, so to speak, on the job, but they would be getting paid the entire time for that whole thing. So I think the first entry of automated trucking is probably as a sort of like an assistant autopilot. Because interestingly enough, that's currently the case with airlines, right? So they're on autopilot the vast majority of the time that you're being flown on a plane. But what they'll do is they'll check coordinates, check weather, contact airports which they're going to be passing to notify them just in case of emergency. Here's a contingency, so on and so forth. So they keep themselves really busy, but it's not super high stress because the plane really just flies itself. So I think it's probably going to be more like that for a while until more true AI is going to just drive the entire truck.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. All right. Harrison Catan says, hi, Dr. Mike and Dr. James. So I guess I'm the MRV guy now because I'm becoming obsessed with understanding it. LOL.
You're not the MRV guy. You're a little late to the game on that. Mike's been the MRV guy for fucking forever at this point. God, hey, Dr. Mike, have I got to my booger MRV yet?
Yeah. Hey, what's the MRV? And this random, like, my failure to make an actual funny joke. Like, oh, yeah, just insert MRV. It'll be a shit joke that no one will ever see on Instagram.
Remember when you hit your MRV for MRV jokes?
Yeah, I really did. Look, Harrison, if you want the title of Mr. MRV, please, for the love of God, take it from me. They'll be like, hey, so you're Mr. MRV? I'm like, nope, that's Harrison Catan from RP Plus. Like, who? Like, just look into it. He's the guy. All right, so he says, I want to understand how to best derive personal MRV baselines for all muscle groups in hypertrophy and all movements, squat, bench, and deadlift. In a hypertrophy training, would you say it's true that the byproduct of raising volume as a mesocycle progresses until performance decreases is finding out where your systemic MRV is, aka how many actual sets total per week of hypertrophy training your body can handle? Absolutely.
Yeah. It might even be the direct goal, too, in some cases.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I'd like to put forward the following hypothesis. Given a fixed and universal number of sets, rep range, and RIR for our muscle groups as a starting point, person/kind over the course of several weeks can use autoregulation to gradually increase sets for all muscle groups until MRV is reached in each muscle group as well as systemically. Interesting. Let's find out how.
Maybe.
Say that again?
I was just saying maybe. So, like, it's like, so this is kind of what this is mostly in line with what we typically are talking about. The thing is, like, sometimes getting every muscle group to local MRV and getting a systemic MRV all in the same mesocycle is just not feasible.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
All right. To do this, I would start with 8 to 10 sets per week per muscle group. Focus on movements that can be loaded heavily and target specific muscle groups well, like press, hack squat versus barbell squats. Interesting. Not switch exercises, but keep the same ones throughout. I guess throughout what? Is it a mesocycle?
Mesocycle?
It should be doing that anyway. Keep RIR constant, 1 or 2. Okay, that's interesting, but will be shitty ecological validity because you don't actually do that in real life.
Right.
Keep training frequency of each body part the same, choosing 2 or 3 times a week each. Again, interesting. Intensity would only increase if reps exceeded the target rep range, i.e. hitting 14 when you're trying to be in the 8 to 12 rep range. Sets would increase via autoregulation, DOMs, and performance. The overall idea is that by the end of this meso, I'd be able to have a baseline of how many sets per week each muscle group can handle when priority isn't given to any particular muscle group from the planning stages, but time and training is allocated evenly, at least at the outset. So I will tell you this, at least at the outset, yes. So there's a problem, at least at the outset. 8 to 10 may be over your hamstrings MRV, but 1/3 of your biceps MRV. So already there's a problem there because it's not auto-regulated start. And then you actually have no guarantee that each muscle group will reach their individual MRV, because what could happen is you could reach hamstring MRV and quad MRV 4 weeks in, but your biceps, through this auto-regulatory process, are still nowhere near fall off in performance.
And to your point, you could reach quadriceps MRV and hamstring MRV, which also led to systemic MRV, even though biceps did not. You know what I mean? So you have it's not a linear, like a symmetrical puzzle, and especially once you kind of, as a beginner, yes, you can kind of use that same strategy to say, like, I'm trying to hit as many of the muscles that I'm trained to MRV and find out where my systemic MRV is. That will likely happen at least a couple times, but for intermediates and beyond, that almost certainly will not happen.
Yeah, and Harrison, we'll see what you say in your sort of follow-up to this, but the way we have been doing it is you sort of have a mesocycle where you train just normally. Yeah, some very much like this, but with a normal variation, 3 RIR all the way to 0, so on and so forth. And you see where each muscle group falls in relation to its local MRV when the systemic MRV is reached, and you have to deal it at the end, right? And so, for example, you'd be like, okay, hamstrings. So systemic MRV was reached for my body at 5 weeks out. Okay, great. I took a deload. Let me look at what happened throughout that whole time. In week 3, my hamstring MRV was basically there. In week 4, my quad MRV was basically there. And you know where the volumes are for those two. Like, it was 12 sets for hams, 16 sets for quads. In week 5, my biceps were feeling like they were pretty close to MRV, but not yet there. Like, the workouts are really burdensome, and my performance was really starting to just very much stabilize and about to dip probably, but didn't dip. So I know and that was 24 sets of biceps. So I know my bicep MRV is probably something like, 26, 28, maybe 30. And then my side delt, I had been training with 20 sets at that point. It didn't feel like anything was happening to them, and the performance was just increasing the entire time. There was not remotely sore, not remotely fatigued. So I know my side delt shit is way off. So what you would do is next time you repeated a meso with those muscle groups, you would have in mind, and that's why James and I actually earlier we said, we don't have MRV as a target. You auto-regulate all your progressions, but you keep in mind where it's going. So when, remember, we have a formula for like, okay, your biceps didn't get sore at all, and your performance went up a ton, and you didn't feel at all disrupted, so you need more. Well, if you know that your biceps have an MRV of like 30, and you only have 4 weeks to climb, adding more bicep sets, maybe you add 2 or 3 sets to biceps next week. But if it's hamstrings, and hamstrings didn't really get sore, and your performance is great, the shit doesn't have a big window, so maybe just add 1 or 2 sets. So that wisdom of how far off everything is from MRV in all of your local muscle groups, when you hit systemic, will tell you, first of all, where to start some of the muscle groups. Their MEVs will probably reflect their MRVs very, very well. And also, you'll know how roughly far you need to progress. So when the question becomes, how much volume do I add per week? If the indicators for the set progression algorithm tell me, yes, volume addition is a good idea, we can bias that to a little more volume addition for the muscles we know have a big window, and a little less for the ones that we don't, and everything in between. James, any corrections to that or any other insights on that?
No, I thought that was great. So, like, this is kind of a really shitty, lame analogy, but to me, if you think about like driving directions where it's like, okay, if I want to drive from LA to Seattle, I'm probably going to at least type it into Google Maps or something and look at an initial plan that says you should probably take the 5 and then get over here and get over here. But at some point when I'm actually making that drive, I'm going to pop on like Waze or something else, and that's going to be telling me exactly what to do right now, right? So it's kind of the same idea where you have a tentative plan, which is like what you look up on Google Maps really quick to see where you're going. And then you have something like Waze that's giving you real-time kind of corrections as you go, right? So you have like a plan and an auto-regulated strategy. You put those two together, you're probably going to get on the best track.
Yep. And then the biceps versus hamstrings thing of huge MRV to small MRV would be kind of like, are you driving through the Portland metro area during rush hour or not? Like, if you're driving during the middle of the night, you're like, well, this is going to take us an hour to get through Portland, no big deal. But if you're driving during rush hour, like, okay, let's stop for food here because you just wait out rush hour. Like, we have to eat dinner at some point. We might as well eat dinner now at 4 p.m., be out of dinner by 6 and have most of rush hour gone, versus trying to get through Portland between 4 and 6, going fucking nowhere. And then we get hungry and then we have to stop anyway when the traffic is good.
Yes.
So
yes,
that sort of thing. Good.
Exactly.
And the only way you really know that is you've driven through Portland before, right? So, all right. All right, and he says the overall idea is by the end of this meso, I have a baseline of how many sets per week each muscle group I can handle. When the priority isn't given to any particular muscle group for the planning stages, but time and training is allocated evenly, at least at the outset. Yep. So for multiple mesos run in a similar way, you would have that. So he says, number one, do you think it's worthwhile to endeavor or rather pointless? I think it's rather pointless because you can just train normally and watch, based on what James and I said, how close to local MRV various muscle groups get. When your systemic hits, you can make all those adjustments just from training normally and watching. So James, pop in if you need. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to reiterate a point you made earlier, you want to do this in the most ecologically valid fashion that you can, which means don't just like make up a thing that you wouldn't do in training. Do your normal training, observe and adjust and like kind of scoot your expectations each subsequent mesocycle. That's kind of what we're saying.
Yeah. Number two, would you keep RIR constant or let it progressively go down from 3 to 0, 3 to 0? Because it simultaneously gives you good data. Because you need relevant data. You need RIR at 0.
And that's how you would train.
Exactly. And then number three, would I be able to locate what my systemic fatigue is by seeing decreased performance in all exercises, not just the ones I'm increased sets in? Absolutely. That's very straightforward. And he says, I have my last powerlifting competition of 2020 in October. After this comp, I plan on doing my first ever cut. I don't plan on competing again until July or August of 2021. In that length of time, do you think that I could conduct this sort of test on myself and then see productive weight loss? I think this would take 6 to 8 weeks, after which I switch back to a more structured type of training like the MPT. I think the structured type of training with perception, with noting where your responses are, with auto-regulation is the best way to note this kind of thing in the most ecologically relevant way.
Yeah, and shameless plug, but if you haven't read How Much Should I Train, that whole book is dedicated to figuring this shit out.
Yeah. If you're Mr. MRV, you had better read How Much Should I Train.
It's like we literally started writing the recovery book and we had so much to say about the volume landmarks. We wrote another book in between the time that we released the recovery book. Literally, yes. That's how much we had to say about it.
So that we could say in the recovery book, hey, by the way, if you need a real big refresher on what MRV means, we're not going to get into it here. We have this whole other book.
Exactly.
I love the RP basic books because in the newer books, we could just say, by the way, you should be recovering if you're dieting. Do you want to know about recovery? We have this whole fucking book, as opposed to just trying to pepper in a bunch of knowledge randomly. You know what I mean?
Dude, I was working on the project that I'm working on for the volume landmark stuff, and it felt so good. I brought up the idea of like the same thing that we were talking about today, pre-planned versus auto-regulated. Don't pick one, do both. And then I was able to write in, like, if you're not familiar with this idea, check out Recovering from Training, right? Like, boom, it's already covered. Yep. Feels good.
Yep. And it says, thanks for all your help. P.S. Girlfriend update. Since my girlfriend and I are both unable to go to the gym right now, I convinced her to buy the at-home training template. I'm doing a 6-day male version, and she's the 6-day female one. We both started the program on the same day, and it's really cool as we can see what each other's doing for the workouts, and it gives us more to talk about as we're in a long-distance relationship. And you're going to be in a long distance for a while with this COVID shit. You feel me?
Oh, damn. Salt in the wound, Dr. Mike.
Ain't nobody going anywhere. She about to give you that bug, son. You can't afford that shit.
Like, social distancing. Oh, man.
You got to give her that, the Drake, like the no, Corona. This was her first encounter with RP. I like it, first encounters of the RP kind. Yeah. The spaceship lands and Jen Case walks out, kicks you in the balls. You're like, man, ow. This was her first
I just had like the daydream of them finally like reuniting after all this stuff. And like both are like super excited to like embrace each other like passionately. But then they're both like, motherfucker, have you been tested for COVID-19? I'm not putting my mouth on your mouth. Get out of here. Go back to where you were.
You best put on that mask before you get to making out. Also, because they've been doing RP for months, they're like super jacked. Yeah. All right. Like they don't even attracted to the people that they are now. They were attracted to who they were. They're like, whoa,
too buff now.
Not into your delts. This was her first encounter. I'm not into your delts, by the way, was something I would never said to a woman and never will.
Yeah.
What a nonsensical statement. This was her first encounter with RP, and I'm happy to report that she's really enjoying it. I'm making an RP junkie out of her. Yes,
right.
Get her addicted to the good stuff. Perfect.
The octopus tentacles spread.
The mechanical octopus that encircles the globe.
I've been using the RP diet to fuel my weightlifting performance for years, and RP's simple, science-based approach has been instrumental to my success. With the new RP Diet app, following RP's principles is as easy as entering my goals and schedule and choosing my favorite foods. The app builds a diet to my exact needs, reminds me to eat my meals, and adapts to my body's changes every single day and week. The RP Diet app is a huge help in my quest to become the best athlete I can be, and if your goal is to be your best, it will help.
Khalid B says, hey, Doc, some questions to you about mesocycle progression I'm a bit confused about. Khalid B always has really good questions. Number one, I start my meso at MEV, so weeks 1 to 3, I'm usually always increasing sets given that soreness and performance are in check. For instance, the same session in week 1 and week 2 might have the same intensity and weight, especially for isolation dumbbell exercise, but the progression in the microcycle is sets. But week 4, I would find that on some sessions, increasing sets might either cause overlapping soreness or decrease in performance. So meso progression must come from intensity or weight. In that instance, if week 3, the template, and week 4 of the template are both at 2 RIR, and let's say the weight on a certain exercise is 25 pounds, in the template, I set the 10 RM as the weight of each dumbbell, so the progressions aren't often. And in both instances, 2 RIR would yield 12 reps. Should I do 13 reps for 1 RIR in week 4 in order to progress that microcycle, or is that not necessary? Meaning have 2 sessions on the same exact variable, sets, weight, RIR is fine, and is equally stimulating given that my 2 RIR reps is still the same. So I think that it's a very, very moot point. As long as you're not regressing in variables week to week, you're fine. But I would say if you feel like 13 would be a more accurate gauge of your 2 RIR now, go for it. If you don't, then don't.
Yes. So doing it for its own sake would be incorrect, right? Doing it because it's an accurate representation of how you feel is what you should be doing. And if it's being the same, it's fine. Like we've talked about this before, you don't have to see a truly linear increase in any one of those variables of volume, intensity, frequency at any one time point across the mesocycle. As long as the general trend is that you are making it harder over time, getting up towards your MRV, you're good to go. So just because 2 sessions ended up being virtually the same doesn't mean that they're not stimulative anymore, so long as over time they are.
Yeah. I did that actually recently. So we're working out with barbells at home and on the roof. And we do this cool thing, a row to chest superset to row to tummy, like row to chest superset traditional barbell. It's awful. Funny enough, the mechanical advantage is so much better on a barbell row that it actually works. But like I only
row to chest is like a pitiful movement, and then compared to standard.
For sure. It's so uncomfortable though, because you're like, I'm falling forward. I hate this. I actually did the same number of reps, except I added 1 repetition versus last week. Same number of sets too. But last week, I wasn't super happy about my technique. Like it was good, but it could have been a little smoother. This time, I just added 1 rep literally to a total number of reps in the 60s. But my technique was way more rock solid. And my RIR was the same or even a little bit, dare I say, higher. So instead of 1 RIR, it was like 2. So then next week, because remember, play the conservative game unless you're being too conservative. So next week, I'm for sure ready because my technique is super rock solid and my RIR is great. Next week, I'm going to add reps to a bunch of stuff. It's totally okay every now and again to do basically the same thing, maybe push forward a little bit, and then be like, okay, that was great. I can go forward. It's better than Icarus burning yourself away doing things you're not able to do.
Yes, agree.
Number 2, must I always match the reps as weights progress for optimal progression, or is that really just to ensure RIR falls? It's just to ensure RIR falls. But I will say that rep matching is a really great way to ensure RIR falls, and simultaneously that you're trying hard, true RIR, right? Because a lot of times, like, James, how many times have you like looked at what you did last week, like squats or something, and you're like, fuck, how the hell did I get 13 reps? And you warm up and you go, God, this is heavy as fuck. And then you nut up and you get like, it's like 5 pounds more and you still hit 13, or if it's like the same weight, you hit 14. And at just when you hit the 14th rep, you're like, fuck, man, like, I didn't know what I had in me, and I would have never done this many reps had I not known I was capable of it from last week. Like for me, matching reps or weight sets like an awesome bar, and unless I really am fatigued and can't achieve it, I try to hit it. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. And at the very least, it's like even if it's wrong, sometimes it's right most of the time, right? So like you're going to have some plus or minuses, but the baseline the mean is going to be like a really good strategy overall. You're probably going to be on like 75% of the time, and then you're going to have like 12.5 up, 12.5 down every now and again. And it's a good trade-off in terms of like implementation.
Yep. Actually, this question is a lot easier than I thought it was. For instance, last time I was on a certain exercise, my weight progressed from say 90 to 95 pounds. And if on the 90 pounds I did 13 reps, but I got 11 on the 95 pounds, and I assessed that my level of intensity was the same in the 2 sessions, would that be fine? It's 100% fine, to quote Jared Feather, because the conversion probably works, but there's a specific formula you can use to convert the two, weights and reps. James knows what I'm talking about, but you don't even need the formula. Like when it's a new weight, don't worry about matching reps when the weight jumps are this big. Like if you're squatting 315 and you go to 320, you did 13 reps at 315. 320 should be 13 reps, or more in most cases. And if it's not, you're probably hitting your MRV. But if you go from 90 to 95, that's a pretty big jump. It's okay that you go from 13 to 11. The next time you do 95, you had better get at least 11, or technically speaking, you have detected an MRV.
Yeah, what I was going to say actually too is like you when you go to 95, you might get 11, and then if you have another week, you might end up getting 13 the next week. You know what I mean? Like, and then it's clear.
Yeah. I find that sometimes not increasing the weight when the template says to increase it works better. For instance, if my target is 12 to 15 reps and I got 12 at 2 or 3R in last session and the template says to increase weight, I'll keep the same weight and just increase intensity by adding rep until I get to 15 reps and increasing the weight. Would that be a good strategy? It's a totally fine strategy. Totally fine strategy. I think that's 100% fine.
Yeah.
Number 3, what if I misestimate my RR on some exercises? Beginning of the meso, I'm going 1 RER instead of 2 or 3, and by week 3, I'm going to failure on those exercises since the RER falls in week 3. Of the template to progress as intensity has actually happened to me in my first meso, the template. Is it wise at this point to keep going to failure? No. For the remainder of the meso on those exercises, or should I do fewer reps and go back to 2 or 3 RR? Absolutely. Fewer reps, 2 or 3 RR. As soon as you detect that you've overdone it, ease up. So for example, if you overdid it in the first week and in the second week's first set, you're like, fuck, man, there's no way that was actually 2 RR. I was a fucking 0 last week. Renorm all the weights. Don't do 11.97, do 8.65, and then next week will be great. Next week will be great. Next week will be great versus trying to catch the dragon that you can't catch.
Especially the first week, that's the easiest time to correct course. Like when you're in the last couple weeks, then you have to make a decision of like, is this one kind of a wash? Did I fuck it up real bad? And should I just start anew, or do I try and keep going? So
100%. Would this be a trade-off accumulating more fatigue versus progressing optimally in the meso? I wouldn't worry about progressing optimally in the meso because fitness and fatigue largely cancel each other out. So you want to progress well fundamentally. And your accumulation of more fatigue would destroy your optimal progression. It wouldn't actually destroy your progression on paper, but you would accumulate so much fatigue that it would interfere with hypertrophy. Even if you hit the numbers, the amount of cumulative fatigue would literally interfere with the mechanisms of hypertrophy. So you don't want to have like a religious experience every mesocycle trying to catch up to make sure you do a good job. So if you start too aggressively, back off as soon as you can, and then go back to the straight and narrow. Yeah,
and I think you maybe just kind of gauging from these last few questions, I think you might be putting too much emphasis on the week-to-week progressions, Khalid. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how it sounds to me, where you seem like you're really gunning for that week-to-week. And that's an okay thing to aspire to, but not if it comes at the expense of having an entire meso of shitty training because you're pushing the intensity up so high and aggressively.
Khalid, my best advice is start at like a real comfy, real conservative 3 or 4 RIR in the first week, and then just plan to either add a little bit of weight or add a repetition every single session, and you'll almost certainly be able to do it, and you'll almost certainly will get to a point where in the last week, when you go to failure, you might be able to squeeze it 2 or 3 more reps and hit big PRs on the exercises. Much rather do that than start too aggressively and fucking flutter out.
Coming from somebody, myself, Winky Face, who used to do that, it's just not worth it. Once you learn how to back off, your training just gets like infinitely better all the time. 100%. Just like, wow, I'm not ever systemically overreached anymore. This is great. Yep.
I did progression on Smith machine shoulder presses last year, a year and a half ago, where I basically added 50 pounds to the exercise for the same reps over the course of multiple months. And the way I did that was I would only ever go up by 5 pounds. 5 pounds every week, and I would take a deload, and then I would start the progression 5 pounds every week. And like I'm a really gnarly overhead presser, and this is in the 300-pound range, right? I basically went from 275 to just over 315 and never lost a single rep. But the way I did it was I could have gone up by 10, but I didn't. I went up by 5, and I never got super, super close to failure, and it was unbelievable progression. So training to failure is cute. It's nice. It works really well for a week or two, but it does not work sustainably, and it doesn't work on super compound basics, which when you go to failure on those, the systemic load is unbelievable. A lot of people pat themselves on the back for going to failure all the time. When you look at what exercises are doing, it's like cable rope curls. Get the fuck out of here. That's nice. Go to failure on bent rows every week and properly done, and let me know how that works out for you.
And even then, so I want to get off this topic a little bit, but even if they're doing something that's better, generally better exercise, like a bench press or a squat or something, it's like, okay, if you go to failure on squats on your first set, what's the rest of that training session going to be like? You know what I mean?
Less.
And I remember watching a lot of DLB's old videos where she would immediately go into doing like partner assist, which is basically super maximal beyond failure for any given movement that she would start. And then the rest of the session is then your partner's getting mostly a workout at that point. You know what I mean? That's just driving me nuts. Where it's just like,
also, how do you track that?
How do you track that? It's like, if you just do a few, like you could just do more sub-max sets and probably get a lot more out of it and have a longer mesocycle or, more frequent exposures per week, whatever, however many ways you want to spin it. But yeah, it's just not a good strategy going to failure.
100%. Lastly, in the metabolite focus phase of the male physique template, I'm currently doing anywhere between 15 to 25 reps on all my first set of exercises. I'm also resting 30 to 40 seconds between them. Saw a podcast where Dr. Mike recommended throwing metabolite at the end of workouts instead. Is that the goal of the metabolite focus? Blend of heavy rep ranges, moderate and light? Or am I doing it right by doing 15 plus on all reps in first set? Well, if you're using the male physique template, use it verbatim. But the male physique template is cannot be made very complex because it's designed for folks that just want to simplify their fitness and get a really great result. It cannot be a program that gives you the optimal result. So, Khalid, you can actually change it a little bit to do a spectrum of ranges, even in the metabolite phase, and save the more metabolite work for the later part of the workout. That's probably better. But once you start messing with a template, best of luck to you, and just make sure your auto regulation is really spot on.
I think for what he was saying about your recommendation, Khalid, just to be clear, I think what Mike was saying is if you're going to do any metabolite work, it should be towards the end of the workout, not in the beginning of the workout. Not necessarily that you can add metabolite work to the end of workouts. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's like if you have metabolite stuff to do it at the end. But don't just tack metabolite stuff on for its own sake.
Yeah. Excellent questions from Khalid. TJ Jankowski says,
just did a podcast with him.
Oh, cool. After sitting down and making a rough guide for a whole year's plan about 2 months ago, this COVID-19 is annoying. We fucked up this entire plan.
Yep.
Also, I appreciate how lucky I am, and that's probably the biggest problem I've had to deal with because of this. I have a bidet.
Yes. Nice.
But it's still a motherfucking problem. As someone who's been strength training for well over 10 years, my systemic MRV, and probably more importantly time, is far lower. The sum of each muscle's MRV, probably even the sum of their MEV. Do you believe that to be incorrect? Maybe.
It's very possible.
This, I was about to spend a good 3 blocks of training with a lower body focus mass. Now that I only have access to some bands, handles, a park, and some homemade sandbag thingies, I switched up to an arms, bis, and tris, calves, and abs focus mass to bring these body parts up. Good idea. Good thinking.
Leg mass would have just been a wash.
This results in the following questions. Number 1, even though I anticipate not being stuck at home for the entire 3 blocks, would you suggest I stick with the focus the entire mass? Do you mean mesocycles? Does he mean blocks or mesocycles? Probably means mesocycles.
I think he's using them interchangeably, yeah, so okay. Mesocycles.
Okay. Would you suggest stick with this focus the entire mass? I think it's important to present a consistent stimulus, so yes. James?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. At my stage of training, I just don't see 1 or even 2 mesocycles being long enough to significantly bring about improvements on a certain body part. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
2, would it be feasible to emphasize my legs on my mini cut following these 3 blocks? Emphasis on mini cuts is not a good idea because mini cuts do not have the bandwidth to support emphasizing anything. Since they should be so sensitive to the volume that I could potentially add some muscle in deficit, probably not. Not at your level of advancement.
Too late in the game for that, my man.
Yeah. Or is it just better to remain patient and hammer them once I go back to massing? Absolutely remain patient and hammer. Number 3, I'm doing pull-ups and push-up variations that I think should be enough to cover the upper body and still hit the arms. But just how low is MV for legs? And how much is it affected by frequency and intensity? Am I better off doing work to failure or very close? Yes, because of the minimal access to equipment I have. Yes. Once a week, or I need to bump it up. Would occlusion training help? Occlusion training would help. It's not very sustainable. I would say twice a week leg training is a good idea. And I would say with at-home dumbbell work, I would say 4 to 6 sets for quads and 3 to 5 sets for hamstrings twice a week. Each is a good, for sure, maintenance so that you don't have to worry about losing stuff with limited equipment, James.
So yeah, sorry, I was chuckling because this MV thing becomes like more and more interesting the more and more we talk about it. So I was thinking about MVs for some muscle groups, and it actually might not be on a traditional time scale that's worth investigating, right? MVs for like something like your legs might actually be like once every 2 to 3 weeks rather than once per week, right? We use our once per week recommendations, and we generally say those are conservative, meaning like you definitely won't lose muscle if you hit your quads, for example, 2 sets twice a week, right? That's something that we would typically recommend. That is probably an overestimate. More likely than not, MVs might be on like a non-linear scale where it might be like every, 2 sets every 9 days or something like that might be just enough to keep you going. So it's one of these funny issues where we haven't really found a bottom end for the MV. And so you can generally assume it's probably lower than you think.
Yeah.
Unless you're like, you have Dr. Mike, sorry, no, I was just going to reiterate, like if you're a bodybuilder, you might have to shift what I just said a little bit but for most people,
training at home, it's a little bit, yeah.
But if you're somebody with Mike's size legs, then your MVs are going to be a little bit higher than somebody with like my size legs.
On a more personal note, Dr. Mike and Dr. Mel, are you still doing any BJJ training? I've been using Danaher's at-home training video that he put out for free, and although it feels super weird shadow grappling, I think I've made some improvements, although it's impossible to actually tell. Yeah, that's a really great idea. And James has talked about a lot that even visualizing and for sure moving with a pretend grappler can make you better at grappling, especially in ways where you execute a particular game plan. Not just, you're not going to get any live rolls out of a shadow grappler, but if you practice specific game plan moves in a specific sequence and solve specific problems, then you can get a lot out of it, absolutely.
Yeah, and actually Tom and I had a really interesting talk this week. I don't think he's posted it yet, but he was kind of talking about MVs for fitness for working at home. And we talked about that a little bit, but then I said, what I think is really the interesting thing, and he works with like a lot of rugby people. And I said, what's probably more interesting is looking at MVs for your skills and tactics, because fitness you can maintain pretty easily, but the actual tactics and skills for your sport are what are going to start deconditioning immediately during this like COVID stuff. So finding creative ways to maintain the feel, the proprioception of a skill, or maintaining the sharpness and decision-making of certain scenarios that you encounter in your sport, those are things that do start to go away in a very, very short amount of time. And if you don't get any exposure to them at all, they're going to start deconditioning immediately. So finding ways to keep those, at least the feel for some of those skills sharp is probably really important. And finding ways of maintaining that like kind of mental sharpness, learning, understanding of the game that you're playing, is also really important. So like watching film, watching like these at-home videos is probably a really good way to stay some of the deconditioning that you're going to see in skills and tactics in lieu of doing direct training. So I think it's a good idea.
All right. Another quick question. I'm an ethical vegetarian, get most of my protein from protein powders. Eggs, my buddy's chicken coop. Social distancing, stop doing that. I'm just kidding. Tofu, seitan, bread and grains as beans, probably in that order. In your opinion, would I still need to shoot high on my protein intake to be sure to full spectrum aminos, or would the more complete sources kind of bleed into that not complete, or would EAAs or BCAAs do anything here? BCAAs are a waste of time. EAAs are also a waste of time. If you consume eggs, then you're really fucking good to go, man.
Yeah, and I think you got a good combination of, like the eggs, the tofu, seitan, stuff like that. You're probably in pretty good shape. I'm not sure. Yeah. Was he asking if he should like round
increases
up
proteins? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is protein powders. TJ, I don't. What kind of powders? Because if it's whey protein powders, you don't need to change a fucking thing. If it's like pea protein or something, maybe you do.
I think you can largely just keep doing whatever you have been doing, and you don't have to adjust for this COVID stuff, if that's the question.
All right. Paul Desadelier.
Another spicy one.
Yeah. Hey, docs, could you please discuss systems-oriented thinking rather than outcome-oriented thinking for hypertrophy, i.e. relentless execution of the process rather than outcome-based goals? Yeah, I can really give my insight, and then James can give his. There are essentially three types of goals. There are outcome goals, performance goals, and process goals. Outcome is I want to win the Olympics. Performance is am I running fast enough week to week and month to month to be on track to that? And process is am I actually eating the meals and doing the workouts to get me there? The thing is, the outcome is this nebulous, hazy thing that is kind of irrelevant in a large sense. The only thing the outcome does is construct your need analysis for how to design your system to train. And performance is cool as a keeping track sort of thing and making sure you auto-regulate properly, but it comes back down to the system does all the heavy lifting. So it's kind of like 90% systems-oriented thinking, or rather whatever term, and this isn't a right or wrong term, process goals are absolutely way more important than performance goals or outcome goals, because they're what actually get you done. Like, you can have all the outcome goals, and I want to be famous, I want to be Mr. Olympia. That doesn't matter. But if you actually have a process goal, if I want to eat 6 meals a day and train 5 times a week, blah, 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 that's very actionable. And if you stick to that, whatever performance you had coming your way is going to come your way, and whatever your genetics mix with that performance improvement, that is going to be leading to your outcome. So the outcome goals and performance goals are really guideposts. It all comes down to the process goals, or what you call systems-oriented thinking. So I think it's important to have a little bit of the outcome-based goals to sort of point you in the right direction. But after that, the car that drives you there is the systems-oriented thinking. James?
Yeah, I'm mostly on par with what Dr. Mike said. I think having those outcome and performance goals gives your whole, whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's training in this case or, life ambitions, it gives you a sense of aim and a sense of purpose. So I think a lot of people often don't put enough effort into actually outlining what those things are, because if you don't have any aim, you have nothing to aspire to, nothing to work for, and then you fall into, nihilistic thoughts of like, I'm a piece of shit and everything sucks and I can't do anything. So I think it is important to like have a really good performance and outcome goals that you can aspire to. And it's something that you should be seeking, and something that fills the pursuit of those things fills your life with joy. But it's the pursuit and the process that tends to bring the most joy, rather than actually seeing like, did I get on the podium? It was more about like, I wanted to be on the podium, and that's what was able to funnel my life into a series of events that I was able to occupy my time in a flow state where I felt challenged and I felt rewarded and I was engaged and I wasn't just sitting around brooding, doing nothing. I think it's noteworthy and it's important, but ultimately I agree with what Mike said, where it's those process goals of making sure that you're doing things consistently, you're engaging in the ways that you are supposed to engage on a daily basis. Those are what end up being the most satisfying. And from a fitness and training perspective, it's the old like embrace the grind kind of mindset really is true. It's really more about like showing up and doing it every day, even when it sucks, rather than thinking about like, oh, I want to be Mr. Olympia. It's like, yeah, you're never going to be Mr. Olympia, little bitch. You got to have a better aim. You should have a better aim. And so I don't think that we should downplay some of those things, but I think from what I've looked into, I'm not a psychologist, but I have looked at this a little bit. The outcome goals do seem to be disproportionate. Excuse me. The process goals do seem to have a disproportionate amount of weight in their importance, meaning they should occupy more of your thought and effort.
Yep. All right. Number 2 from Paul. Why is hypertrophy/bodybuilding style training not yet widely accepted in the medical community as a primary method of preventative medicine for the general population? What do you think needs to be done to further advance this narrative? I think the narrative is advancing, and now there's a lot of good recommendations, but honestly, I think they need more meta-analytic data as to how much of a difference it makes. A lot of the resistance training stuff is very short-term intervention data with very low volumes that doesn't help as much as it could if it was longer-term and more high volume. So some analysis of like cohorts that are like, more ecological observational data might help, but it's slowly changing. I don't know if much needs to be done other than the fact that more research to be conducted. And as more research is conducted, the medical community slowly turns its gears. It's a good thing that it turns its gears relatively slowly, because then you want doctors to say mostly stuff that works. And even if it takes them a while to accept the stuff that works, that's probably okay for things like preventative care. We definitely don't want doctors to have a reputation of like going with fads and pointing people in the wrong direction.
So yeah, it's kind of one of those interesting things too, where you could flip the question in reverse and say, why in the fitness community have we not embraced genetic testing and risk factor analysis and blood work as part of our daily thing? Well, there's just a significant diverging in the fields at some point, right? They're going to start overlapping more and more, but doctors go into medicine, like exercise physiologists go into exercise. Like they do overlap a little bit, but they also distinctly diverge. So we don't see these kind of recommendations enough because doctors don't study exercise the way that exercise physiologists do, and we don't study health the way that doctors do. So there's going to have to be some intersectionality in the future for that to become more and more mainstream.
Yep. Aiden gives us a series of questions. Says, hi, Mike and James. Hope you're both doing well in these uncertain times. I have a few questions that I hope you can answer. Question 1. Can you give us a brief outline of the study you carried out with Jared on mesocycle progression? What were the results, if you could give them? The study, I believe, is publicly available. It's not a study. It's actually just a review of the literature. There was no study conducted. But the brief outline is that when you're choosing how to progress during a mesocycle, adding volume is probably a good idea. But give that a read. It's like 4 pages long, so it's not a tough read. Question 2, with all the coronavirus stuff going on, I decided to buy a home gym with most of the essentials, but I'm missing heavy dumbbells, and I'm able to carry on as normal with the plan. With this new setup, I'd like to try 2-a-day training when I start my next mass. Do you have any guidelines on how to set up the training? Yes. What to do, not to do? Yes. If I recall, there's a twice daily training section in the RP book, Diet 2.0, which I can lower for the nutrition side of things. Yep. One idea I had was to do heavy quads in the AM and then light hamstrings in the PM. Am I on the right lines? Maybe. Would you be able to outline your split when you did twice daily training? Absolutely not. But I can do you one better. In about a week or 2, we're going to be releasing for your RP Plus folks, free twice daily training at home guide with sample programs. And in addition to that, Steve Hall on Revive Stronger YouTube, which you should be subscribing to, just did an interview of myself, Jared, and Charlie, my training partners. And it was all about, basically an hour or an hour and a half, all about twice daily training. And so that's going to get you really, really well set up.
Excellent.
Question 3. I know you said that specialization phases should be kept for more advanced lifters, for ones that total body MRV will not be high enough to allow all parts to be trained simultaneously. I'm using MRV, but I'm really keen on bringing up my chest, delts, and arms. In terms of planning this, would a good idea to be 2 mesocycles of arms, chest, and delts specialized with lower body on back MV. Then after these 2 mesocycles, put arms, chest, and delts on MV, and then take my legs back through the MEV and MRV. But what would you do after this? Anything you want, by the way. Where would maintenance periods come in? Anytime you want, as well as mini cuts, fat loss phases. The easy one is mini cuts and fat loss phases. Say what?
I do that to my clients all the time. They're like, what happens next? Like, whatever you want. Like, when should we do it? Like, whatever you want.
Yeah. So there is actually an easy answer here. Mini cuts and fat loss phases should always be done with everything either on MV or MEV, so no priorities. And then during mass gaining phases, whatever you want to grow now, you should be doing in emphasis. That's it.
Yeah.
Also, with you only trying to grow a select amount of body parts, does that warrant a lower caloric surplus? No, because you should be squeezing all of the volume you can out of your plan anyway. You just biased it more to some body parts and less to others, but the total volume should be basically the same. So you should still be training to systemic MRV. It's just a different composition. But if you can train your entire body to systemic MRV, then you shouldn't be prioritizing. But if you still want to prioritize, by definition, training an average of everything less, then yes, you should mitigate your caloric surplus a little bit.
Yeah, we've talked about this in a previous webinar. Like, this will only kind of come up if you're doing something like a biceps, triceps mass phase, where it's like,
forearms,
there's just not a lot of muscle mass to be soaking in a lot of the extra calories. So it might be worth adding, another muscle group at that point.
What gain rates would you recommend to grow my arms, chest, and delts? At the lower end, if you're really intent on doing this and not training everything else hard, the lower end of the 0.25 to 0.5%. Question 4. I'm sorry for the lack of info on this one. This is all I've got. My dad recently went to the doctor and they said he had some sort of metabolic syndrome, because probably not some sort of metabolic syndrome. It's probably just called metabolic syndrome, and that he could possibly be diabetic. That means he's probably pre-diabetic. They told him that he needed to cut out all carbs and only eat meat for at least 3 months. Does this sound like good advice for someone who is possible diabetic? Yes, because they're probably doing this in order to get him to drop a ton of weight rapidly and get him out of the pre-diabetic condition. With the doctor's advice of cutting out all carbs, have the aim of bringing back insulin sensitivity? Not directly, unless the doctor is misinformed, but it sure as hell make you lose a lot of weight, and that'll probably increase your insulin sensitivity. They do this kind of diet for folks that are really, really on the edge and really need, it's not a sustainable diet, and doctors usually know that. It's just to bring you out of that danger zone as rapidly as possible.
Yeah, I am a little surprised they said only eat meat. They generally will say like
meat and veggies and stuff.
Meat and veggies or something like that. Yeah, it's never just like, because that sounds an awful lot like a
carnivore diet.
Carnivore diet, and that has been recently popularized by Joe and Jordan Peterson, who did it for other reasons. Yeah, so I would just be my stink eye kind of raised a little bit at the only meat. I would want to verify that.
The thing is, I would just do what the doctor says. This is a doctor for a reason. And also, if your dad is uncomfortable with the doctor saying, and you both think he doesn't know what he's talking about, then I would go to get a second opinion from another doctor.
What I'm guessing is like his dad said, "Oh, doctor wants me to be on this diet where only meat," and he left out the parts where the doctor said, like, "Okay, we're primarily meat and vegetables," or something like that.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
For sure. Question 5: what are the downsides of too low a fat intake? The standard recommendation is to have fat set at 0.3 per pound of body weight, but I'm currently undergoing a mini cut on lower calories than usual due to not working because of the coronavirus. Would it be okay to drop fats below the 0.3? This is only 4 weeks. I did a trial run of this on my last cut, but we're only 2 or 3 weeks in the end. Seemed okay, but wonder if it was a good idea, whether it was a good idea for now. For my mini cut, sorry for mini cut question, no big deal. So the 0.3, that's the downsides there, like hormonal stuff and hunger stuff and energy stuff, some health stuff, but that really only presents after weeks and weeks. So we actually do specify in our RP Diet 2.0 that occasional several week or even several month extrusions from 0.3 are totally fine. So I think you're totally fine.
I don't know what you're talking about. This guy's going to die. If you go below 0.3, dude, you are done. You remember Total Recall when Arnold was like out in space and his face got all fucked up? That's
People think that's from the Martian atmosphere, but it was really because he was chronically underdosing his fats. Just a strange coincidence that it happened right when he fell out. Question 6: do you have the release dates for form alterations of the squat and leg press form? No, but we have those videos recorded, and we're going to be putting out one of those a week. They will arrive eventually. Thank you for answering my questions. You're absolutely welcome. Erno Toivonen is up next. Hi, Mr. Doctors. Yes, indeed. I am from Finland. Ha! Easy money.
Met him in Finland.
Yeah. Regarding the last time's question about 5 days a week at the gym, at the moment, here gyms are not closed by orders of the government, and I don't think they will. Ballsy idea. We need to go the fuck to Finland. Some gyms have closed on their own and people refrain from going, etc., but my gym is open and will stay open unless government steps in. It's a fairly good-sized one, but has a lower number of members. I've been curious how it hasn't gone bankrupt even before Wuhan virus hit. We all go to some businesses. I'm like, how the fuck? Like this one pizza place I go to in Philly, I'm like, how the fuck does this place make money? No clue at all.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Also, I already bought the 5-day MPT a month ago out of curiosity. Then questions. Number 1, if I were to indulge in heavy blackout and pass out style alcohol activities for a day or two, would the deload week be the best time for it? Yeah, probably the middle part
least
of the deload.
Negative. Yeah.
Don't do it at the end because you need to get some swag back for your week. Middle part of the deload week, early part of the deload week, fine.
Yeah, like once you don't feel like total shit anymore, then go for it.
Yeah. Number 2, in powerlifting, weightlifting, it is always emphasized to lift every rep with every weight as hard as possible. So with hypertrophy training, no, not necessarily. Is this more a technique thing or stimulus thing? So in powerlifting, weightlifting, your nervous system performance can actually independently get boosted by maximum intent to move. In hypertrophy training, it's not clear that this is the case, and we have reason to believe it might not be the case. As long as you're trying hard and getting closer to fail, you will have to do this towards the end of sets, but you might not have to do it the entire time. So,
yeah, it's also more necessary because other sports tend to rely on strength and power characteristics more. So it's a way of increasing like the central activation of the muscles and getting closer to a maximal effort, which puts you more into the range of kind of strengthy activities rather than just pure hypertrophy or endurance activities.
I will say though that especially if you're doing a set, you probably want the faster fibers to get a lot of tension through them when they're fresh, because the faster fibers fatigue faster than slower fibers. So if you really just go really low velocity throughout a set, and you only turn up the intent to move towards the end when you're already tired, keeping the velocity low but trying harder and harder, you may sort of be inundating the faster switch fibers with a lot of nervous system fatigue and a lot of metabolite fatigue that may actually prevent them from getting their real swag on towards the end. So when you want them to go, they're kind of too fatigued to really do much. So I would say that getting a good forceful concentric, at least on a very, very theoretical, very tentative basis, is probably a good idea. What you definitely don't want to do is like go through the motions and then really turn it up in the last several reps. You want to
that's what I was going to say.
Get a good thing going, but don't overthink it.
Consistency greater than accuracy in this case.
Number 3, does excessive stretching and or massaging have a negative effect on hypertrophy? Almost certainly, because it accumulates fatigue. James, please.
Excessive stretching, it has definitely a more tangible effect where you can actually start to see susceptibility to injury goes up. And this is like, when we say excessive stretching, we're talking about like doing hours and hours of stretching throughout the week. It's a lot. You can actually start to see force and power output go down, and a whole bunch of nasty stuff happens which could have like a downstream effect on your ability to train hard. So definitely on stretching. Massaging, it's not clear if there's going to be like a truly negative effect on hypertrophy. What I would say is you're more likely to make type 1 type errors in terms of your preparedness. So what that means is you're going to feel like you're ready to go when you're not actually ready to go, and then you're going to go into the gym and either have a bad day or maybe even be more susceptible to injury. And I would say with the massaging, it's also just a huge opportunity cost. Like, you're just kind of wasting time that you could be doing something else, frankly. So I think stretching is definitely more of a red flag on this one than massage, but massage certainly is worth mentioning.
Yep. All right. Number 4, is MRV, et cetera, related to the intensity, meaning you can do more sets the further you are from failure and so on? Yes. Last week, for the microcycle,
absolute and relative sense.
Yep. Last week, 5th microcycle, I did my final quad emphasized workout before deload with 4 sets of narrow stand squats, 5 to 8 reps, and with stops, and 3 sets of hack squats with 12 to 8 reps with stops. Also, I did both of them about 1 hour IR. The previous quad emphasized workout, 4th microcycle, I skipped due to happenings in life. But the one before, the 3rd, I did the same volume and 2 IR. From the final workout, I got super painfully sore quads and apparently also overreached since the glute ham emphasis workout later in the week. Saw a drop in performance at quad-related movements. I can't think of any explanation other than closer proximity to failure.
Nope.
I can think of another one. You took a break. That's a big deal.
We were on the same wavelength.
Yep, closer proximity to failure definitely helped. Or some weird small change in exercise technique, or the fact that both movements were new in rotation, since the volume was the same that I had done a couple weeks earlier without overreaching. Yeah.
Mike and I seem to agree. I think it was more the time off that got you than the one from fail. Now, you could also say like the time off in combination with like a large delta in intensity from the last one could be contributing too, but more likely than not, it's like you just had some time off and now you're sore.
The time off is the big one there. Carl VG says, "Hi docs, I'm currently planning my upcoming massing meso. I'll be training at the gym 6 days a week, AM and PM. AM, and doing PM workouts from home 3 days a week, calves, delts, biceps, and forearms. I want to train biceps and forearms 4 days a week, and everything would fit so much better if I did a bicep and forearm workout PM on my 7th day, no gym/rest day. This would be very low stress, 5 to 8 sets, 20 to 30 reps biceps, and 8 to 120 reps forearm curls, 20 to 30 reps per set. I'm wondering if this is a bad idea from a systemic fatigue perspective. Yes. And I'd be better off resting completely on a day 7, or if I'm all good. I think I would just rest completely on day 7. Carl, I've tried a bunch of these, man, and everyday training fucks with you like nothing else.
Yeah, this is just one of those where you're never going to find a situation where Mike and I are going to back down on having that take one day off standpoint. Like, there's infinite reasons why you might try and squeak in, 5 sets of something light on that day off, but ultimately you still have the stress of another session looming overhead. You still have that building systemic fatigue. It's always in your best interest to have that one day off for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. And look, we might be wrong. Try it.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll be right. All right.
To the YouTube.
Person with unreadable name. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, share it up.
Person with that name right there. Asks rather.
Invalid name.
Invalid name.
Internet speak.
Except some of them are numbers. He took time to do this. Is dumbbell wall squat, hack squat imitation, where the back is flat against the wall and you slide in a foam roller or something cylindrical up and down the wall, keeping all the focus on quads and, of course, done with good ROM, a good main exercise for quads during gym closure? I've got plenty of weight for this to be done in every desired rep range. Damn. I've never done hack squats before due to space constraints. I cannot get a squat rack. So I can't get the desired weights in position for front squats or high bar squats. Thanks. Well, it's okay. If you have enough weight and you can get a position, the only other thing I'd worry about is make sure you set your feet in such a way and the surface is good so that you don't slide away from the wall. But if it's an exercise that really allows you to load, it feels good. Stimulus to fatigue ratio doesn't feel weird on your knees. You feel like your force is really capped because you're trying not to get the foam roller to shoot out of your ass. If you can produce meaningfully high forces and really tax the muscle, then it's kind of like it's kind of like a self-answering question. Try it, and if it certainly on a technical examination could work, but we all have our best intentions, and sometimes you get this thing where you're like, man, on paper this is going to work great. You try it, and you're like, this sucks, and it just blows. So I don't want to say it's going to be for sure good, but it certainly can be a thing. James?
You know what got me fucking pumped this week? I think it was on your Instagram actually. Some guy was doing squats with his garage door.
Yeah.
I was like, you are the man. That is the craziest shit I've ever seen for like these at-home modified workouts. But you know what? Like, if it works, it works. And I think that's fine. So just to answer your question, yeah. So I think what Mike said is great. It's kind of a self-correcting problem where if you don't feel it in your quads and you feel like you just do 1,000 reps and you don't feel any disruption, you don't feel any tension, you don't feel any soreness, then it's not worth your time. Try and find something else.
Yep. All right.
Can I shout out at somebody real quick?
Yeah.
Scroll down a little bit. Old YT channel. My man. So I think that was the guy who asked the arm wrestling question. So that video should get posted this week. It's actually, I did 2 videos on arm wrestling because I was so pumped.
That's awesome.
And actually just a shout out, watch those 2 videos. I don't know when the second one's going to get released. But if you want to bring up more specific scenarios, because I did more of a general overview of what this kind of might look like, but I don't have enough personal experience with arm wrestling to know like the skills, the drills, the tactics training. I just don't know it well enough. So if you have anything specific you want me to address, holla at your boy and I'll do another one because I really enjoyed the arm wrestling question.
Yep. Adam Conrad says, with everyone on lockdown and the advice to eat at maintenance or slight surplus, is there opportunity for recomposition? I've been dropping weight after coming off a 3-month strength mass for powerlifting, and all this high rep hypertrophy band work makes me believe I could recomp on the maintenance calories. Sound reasonable? It depends on your level of training experience and how hard you're training at home and how good your nutrition is. If you're not super experienced in training or a beginner intermediate, if you're training a ton, like doing twice daily workouts, and you're really getting great stimulus to fatigue ratios and hitting the target muscles, getting really good raw stimulus magnitudes, then I think that you can get some recomp going. But on the other hand, if you're a person who's used to really heavy equipment, not getting the greatest workouts at home, and also is pretty advanced, then a recomp is much less likely than just a maintenance. James?
Yeah, I would say again, we said this before, but recomp is nothing to program. It's not something you aspire to. It's a happy accident. So if your goal was to be leaner, I would say just do a cut. And if your goal was to be more jacked, just do a mass. I mean, there's nothing wrong with training for hypertrophy under maintenance conditions. You're going to have great workouts, and there could be some long-term recomp that could happen there. It's just not going to be a big payout in terms of effort and time. So I would say pick whatever you want and go for it.
Yep. Lastly, none other than Milo Wolf himself.
Ooh.
Says, regarding your comment on vomiting, once your legs get a certain size because blood gets diverted away from the GI tract towards the legs, in Max Phys class, one of the first things we learned was that during exercise, the proportion of blood flow towards the GI tract and other non-muscle tissues is reduced, but the absolute blood flow cardiac output essentially is increased several-fold. This is during aerobic exercise on normally sized individuals. It may not transfer to anaerobic exercise for gigantic individuals, which is why most people don't vomit from training legs, just really giant ones. This means that blood flow towards non-muscle tissues is not actually reduced during exercise. Very good point. Instinctively, that makes sense. Your body probably doesn't want your brain, for example, to run out of blood flow oxygen where your thoughts appear. Well, if you've trained hard enough and you're big enough, your brain actually doesn't feel all that great either. So in very large, very muscular people, in resistance training where blood pools and fluids pool in the legs versus being circulated as much, may actually be true. You get an absolute decline in blood flow to some of those organs, or relative to how much metabolic throughput is happening, even if they have more blood flow, your body may make some neural and hormonal decisions with stomach contents that are basically like, this is way too hard of activity. We're not going to get proper digestion and delivery to all the places in the body that we need, and time to throw up. That being said, and this Philip with the last name that is wildly unpronounceable says, couldn't it be lactic acidosis? Lactic acidosis is almost certainly the main cause of this, and it's certainly a contributor. So definitely that's a factor.
Yeah, and the lactic acidosis is going to be more prevalent in somebody who's either doing, like a large amount of large amount of muscle mass activity or somebody with like giant muscles, right? So if you're doing something like CrossFit, right, your chances of vomiting is probably a little bit higher. Or if you have Dr. Mike sized legs and you're doing, hack squats for sets of 20, it just has such a large metabolic impact, even at the local level, as it starts to leach out and get, reuptaken into the bloodstream, that purging some of that stomach acid ends up being beneficial.
Boom. Folks, that's it. That's all we got.
That's it. Okay, just a few housekeeping things for me. I recorded my 2 sport ones. I did a Q&A session, and I did a little bit of arm wrestling, and then I did another arm wrestling session where I just went off for a little while. So that will hopefully get posted this week. So if you guys want to ask any more sport questions, you can post them in this webinar, or if you see the Training for Sports with Dr. James, you can post them in that webinar too, and I'll kind of selectively go through and pick and choose which ones I want. Other than that, I don't know. I don't got anything. Mike, anything for you?
No, but we're working hard on some cool stuff at RP, so be on the lookout. And check out our YouTube videos, man. Oh, you guys are on YouTube. We always have some new videos. We have the technique videos are coming out every week, picking apart exercises.
Some of those had obnoxious amount of views. I just was scrolling through, like the webinars would be like, oh, this one had 2,000 views, this one had 10,000 views, and then it was like side delt correction video, like 50,000 views. I was like, what? So many people want to know about the side delt correction.
Yeah. And so this week's video was just released today. It's probably going to be pretty big. If you folks can pass it around, it's the push-up video, like 11 ways to fix your push-ups, because people do push-ups so fucking wrong. I got the motivation to do this. I put it in the list of exercises we filmed, and we filmed it with Joey of Sat Strength on YouTube just recently. But like the reason I got the motivation to finally do it is because people are tagging me in these push-up challenges and on Instagram, and I'm like, motherfucker, you said I should do 50 push-ups. You've done 0 in this video. These are not push-ups. They're wildly terrible range of motion, terrible body position. Nothing's going on here. You didn't do any push-ups. So we released this video since a lot of people are training at home now. I think it's going to be like a cool video to be like, hey, look, you want to do push-ups? Here's how to do an actual one. It's a lot harder than people think. So.
That'll be good. I'm sure it'll get a lot of views. So if you guys want to see all those crazy videos on exercise corrections, and not to mention all the RP podcasts, the webinars, my shit, some of our RP Plus videos are being uploaded there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you'll get a little notification, or you'll at least see it in your stream whenever we post new stuff, and you'll always have access to all of our RP stuff. I think that's it. We're going to wrap it up. Folks, have a good one. Hope you guys are staying healthy and well supplied, and we will talk to you next time.
Peace.